Sarah stood alone in the observation chamber, surrounded by gleaming consoles, climate-controlled specimen tanks, and the persistent hum of distant machinery. Everything in the lab was arranged with meticulous precision, each instrument carefully positioned to optimize the study of alien biologies. He took pride in his work. As a xenobiologist of the Icarian Consortium, his tasks encompassed analyzing the genetic structures of countless species scattered across the galaxy. The typical goal was to identify weak spots, small genetic flaws, or vulnerabilities that might be exploited if necessary in trade negotiations or, more ominously, in warfare. But at that moment, Sarek could not tear his gaze away from the swirling mass of data hovering on the primary display screen. He had received a routine delivery of biological samples the previous day, all part of the normal data exchange that Icarians kept with various species. Most were expected to be unremarkable. A snippet of scale from an amphibious race, a tuft of fur from a mild mammalian type, dried leaves carrying the spores of a plant-based civilization. Yet among these arrivals was a sealed vial of crimson fluid labeled human specimen. It was the first time he had ever encountered human DNA in such a pure state. At best, he had read a few reports mentioning humans as a relatively new addition to the galactic stage. Their technology was modest, their fleets small, and they tended to keep to themselves. So why, he wondered, did their sample produce such irregularities on every test? He had carefully run the sample through the standard battery of exams: immune system markers, cell resilience, metabolic flexibility, and was greeted with consistently high performance across all categories, none of which alone would have shocked him. Many species boasted strong immune responses or adrenaline surges in times of crisis. But then came the deeper scan. A display of bright red data spiraled across the holoscreen. It showed an unknown genetic sequence embedded within the human chromosomes. At first, he thought it must be a glitch in the scanning apparatus, perhaps due to contamination or a calibration error. But every recalibration yielded the same results. Every cleansing procedure returned the same anomaly. It was almost as though part of this human DNA bore a resemblance, however faint, to certain ancient genetic samples the consortium had studied long ago. The initial readout indicated a 5% match, but additional scans kept pushing that percentage higher. Now it stood at 7.3%. That figure, small as it was, still far exceeded any overlap in standard interspecies comparisons. For typical comparison, two intelligent species might share a fraction of a percent in common building blocks. To achieve more than 7% pointed towards something extraordinary. Sarek paced, hands clasped tightly behind his back, glancing at the silent row of specimen containers on a shelf. Each one held the essence of a species. Some, he knew, were extinct. Others thrived on worlds that spanned luminous gas giants or tiny rocky planets orbiting red dwarf stars. In his entire career, he had never encountered data as disconcerting as this. It was more than an oddity. It was an implication that humans somehow shared genetic material with the so-called ancient blood, a group that the galaxy had collectively come to revere, or even fear, as the primals. He remembered the legends, half myth and half archaeological study. The primals were rumored to have harnessed powers that went beyond conventional science, sometimes referred to as psychic, other times described in purely metaphorical language. To see a sliver of that genetic signature in humans baffled him. He pressed a button to seal the lab. He then methodically deleted every automated log related to the deeper scans, preserving only a single copy of the data on his personal device. This was not information he wanted to share with the entire consortium, at least not until he understood it. He stared at the screen again and exhaled. Despite the sense of confusion that churned in him, a new determination also began to take form. There was only one thing to do: investigate. He had the authority and clearance for independent research missions. He simply needed to declare a special xenobiological expedition. No one would question it. He was Sarek, after all, responsible for discovering cures to major interstellar plagues. His word carried weight. He moved swiftly out of the lab, encountering guards in the corridor. They bowed, typical of how Icarians recognized individuals of prestige within scientific hierarchies. He quietly ordered them to admit no one to the lab, not even his usual research assistants, explaining that an extremely sensitive test was in progress. The guards, well accustomed to his high status, did not argue. Sarret made his way through the pristine hallways of the facility, passing other scientists who offered polite nods, though their eyes brimmed with curiosity. He wasted no time boarding a private lift that shot upward to a smaller landing bay at the structure's apex. He was intent on departing as quickly as possible. When he stepped onto the landing bay, he found his personal starship, the Heliod, an elegant vessel designed for both comfort and advanced research. The crew stood waiting, led by a tall officer named Rebus. Sarret explained that he had an urgent research directive and that the Heliod should be provisioned for immediate departure. Rebus, though a professional, could not conceal a flicker of confusion when Sarret announced that all crew would disembark except for him. Regulations normally required a minimum skeleton crew for a jump, but Sarret overrode the policy with a wave of his identification. His rank and previous contributions to Icarian security were enough to silence any objections. Once inside, the Heliod system sprang to life at his command. He initiated engine startup, locked external hatches, and guided the ship skyward. Lights on the control panel flickered in acknowledgement, and soon the craft soared above the quiet spires of Acheron's capital. Within minutes, the faint purple hue of the planet's atmosphere gave way to the star-freckled darkness of space. Sarret brought up the navigational interface. The final flight plan he input would route him to a station known as Solaris Station, where Rumor placed a small but dedicated human contingent. If he wanted additional samples or direct contact with humans in a relatively neutral location, Solaris Station was the logical destination. As the Heliod accelerated into hyperspace, Sarret found his mind racing with possibilities. How could humans have acquired this gene? Had the primals interfered in their evolution? The notion seemed preposterous. The primals had not been openly heard from in centuries. They were as good as legends, except for those few fragments of evidence that lingered in archaeological records. His curiosity burned, and at the same time he felt unease. If humans genuinely carried pieces of primal genetics, might that represent a threat to the existing order? Or was it an opportunity for an extraordinary alliance? Sarret's entire life revolved around classifying strengths and weaknesses, but now it felt as though he might be touching the edge of something far larger than any one civilization. He tried to rest, but the swirling lights of hyperspace outside the ship's windows seemed almost hypnotic, captivating him and fueling a flood of questions. It was going to be a long journey. He began a deeper review of the data, cross-referencing everything he knew about the so-called ancient bloodlines. Energy manipulation, rumored telepathic abilities, the capacity to alter or manipulate matter at will. How could humans, who only recently ventured beyond their own planet, connect to any of that? The hours slipped by. Eventually, the navigational readouts indicated that the Heliod would drop out of hyperspace soon. Sarret prepared for re-entry, checking scans of Solaris Station. In a swirl of starlight, the ship emerged near a modest metallic structure orbiting a pale blue gas giant. Solaris Station was not large, but it was recognized in official galactic records as a legitimate outpost devoted to intercultural research and commerce. Sarret expertly guided the ship to a docking clamp, feeling a twinge of excitement. Another step closer to understanding this puzzle. Once the airlock pressurized, he emerged into corridors lit by bright overhead strips that cast a utilitarian glow on the polished floors. He had visited many stations in his lifetime, but this was the first that actively involved humans. He noted the signs in various languages, including the human's own tongue, a script with a certain direct simplicity. Station staff soon approached. An attendant, a tall insectoid from a race Sarret recognized as Cerealians, clicked out a greeting and offered him a visitor's pass. He quickly stated his business, citing xenobiological studies, and received a welcome nod. Humans were apparently not a majority on Solaris Station, but they maintained a steady presence here, and the staff was used to handling visitors. He wandered the station's main concourse, which opened into a central atrium featuring transparent walls that provided a view of the swirling gas giant outside. Various species moved about, a heavy-set amphibious group from the outer colonies, a cluster of avian bipeds chattering in melodic voices, and a handful of humans wearing functional station jumpsuits. Sarah watched them. They looked physically unimposing at first glance, around average height, hair in diverse shades, skin in a range of tones, and generally overshadowed by the more imposing shapes of other aliens. But he could not help recalling the genetic data that suggested something hidden beneath that unassuming exterior. He caught sight of a pair of humans who seemed to be scientists, indicated by the tools attached to their belts. Approaching them, he introduced himself politely. They regarded him with fleeting curiosity. One, a woman with dark, wavy hair, said her name was Dr. Helen Kessler. Her colleague was a younger man, Taro Winfield. They were on their way back to a research module and invited Sarah along after he hinted he had a particular interest in human physiology. As they navigated the station's corridors, Sarah tested them with questions that seemed innocuous. Their backgrounds, their reason for being here, hoping to glean insight into how they saw themselves. Dr. Kessler explained that they had arrived to collaborate with scientists from other species, comparing medical techniques and possible improvements in immune system resilience. Taro added that humans had historically adapted to harsh environments on Earth, developing what they believed was a robust capacity to endure temperature fluctuations, pathogens, and physical challenges. Sarah nodded calmly, though inwardly he felt that their words confirmed part of what he had seen in the genetic data. As they approached the research module, Dr. Kessler guided him inside, showing him an array of equipment for analyzing microscopic organisms. Rows of samples lined the walls, labeled meticulously. Sarah tried to remain composed. He asked if they would be willing to provide him with a small set of anonymized data about typical human immune responses. He framed it as a normal xenobiological request. They seemed open to the idea, though they asked about Akarian interests. He gave a vague reference to academic pursuits and the general benefit of exchanging knowledge. Though apparently satisfied, Dr. Kessler noted that humans had historically been cautious when it came to sharing too much, perhaps a lesson from their own tumultuous past. Nonetheless, she did not refuse him outright, saying she would consult with her colleagues. Sarah spent a few hours in the research module, observing how the humans manipulated lab equipment. Akarian devices might have been more precise, but there was an ingenuity in the humans' approach, a willingness to reconfigure or improvise. On more than one occasion, Taro used the tool for a slightly different purpose than originally intended, a creative solution that startled Sarah. These people had a fluid sense of adaptation, reminiscent of the potential he had glimpsed in the data. But he needed more than casual conversation. He needed confirmation of that ancient link. Poring over newly provided data sets, he saw further evidence. Heightened hormone surges under stress, near-instant immune adaptability in certain cases. Nothing explicitly proved the presence of ancient blood, but it was enough for him to realize that a deeper investigation was warranted. Outside the module, in the station's corridor, he overheard a rumor that a human soldier had returned from a distant frontier post where harsh conditions should have incapacitated him within days. Yet the soldier had survived for weeks. Impressive, but still not definitive. He left Solaris Station the following day, not without giving a polite farewell to Dr. Kessler and Taro. They seemed perplexed by his sudden departure, but offered no objection, as if used to the mercurial schedules of alien researchers. Once aboard the Heliod again, Sarah laid in a new course, feeling the tension coil in his belly. He had decided to go to Earth itself. If he was to learn anything substantial about the heritage of the human species, it might be found on their homeworld, among their historical archives. He set the drive to jump to a route that would take him across multiple star systems. If the data on humans was incomplete in interstellar records, perhaps more direct evidence lay within the cradle of their civilization. The Heliad soared through the cosmic highways, leaping from one point in space to another. Sarah spent the idle hours rummaging through references on recorded contact with the primals, those elusive beings rumored to alter reality with a thought. Virtually every modern account was second-hand or heavily mythologized. But the data did specify that if any species had ever truly encountered a primal, the event was always characterized by secrecy and awe, followed by radical shifts in local civilization. A battered starship from an unknown era, a single blood sample. These were the only scraps of evidence the Icarian consortium possessed. Now, he was seeing the same signature in humans. Days later, Earth's sun came into view, a bright star illuminating a system that teemed with satellites, spaceships, and orbital platforms. Sarah let the Heliad broadcast a standard approach signal. Earth had grown in influence over recent decades. Small though it was on a galactic scale, the planet was dotted with cities, research installations, and historical preservation centers. Most visitors still found it exotic. After clearance from an orbital traffic control station, Sarah brought the ship down to a landing zone near Earth's major science complex, an area known for housing elaborate archives of humanity's past. Exiting the vessel, Sarah found himself immersed in a mild atmospheric temperature, with Earth's sky a pleasant blue. The spaceport bustled with humans in uniform directing various ships, as well as travelers from other species. A few security officers gave him quizzical looks, but his credentials as a xenobiologist ensured minimal friction. After a quick formal exchange, he was allowed to pass, though an official politely advised him to report to Earth's Interstellar Relations Office if he planned to conduct any detailed studies involving humans. Sarah nodded agreeably. He wasted no time hailing a transport to the Earth Historical Institute, a vast complex that combined modern architecture with centuries-old structures. Long halls and tall glass windows were interspersed with carefully preserved facades of antique buildings. In the main atrium, he beheld large banners referencing major milestones in human history: technological revolutions, colonization of Mars, first contact with alien species. Guided by a digital kiosk, he reached a specialized department dedicated to analyzing archaeological relics. Here, according to records, ancient human myths and legends were studied with modern scientific tools. Sarah introduced himself to the Institute's curator, a tall man with a thick beard, Dr. Armand Lou, who peered at him through small round glasses. Dr. Lou politely asked about Sarah's objectives. Without revealing the entire truth, Sarah mentioned a wide-ranging comparative genetic study, seeking any Earth-specific legends about otherworldly visitors. The curator perked up at that, launching into a discussion about countless myths from different continents that told of sky beings, angels, or gods descending to Earth. Some might have been fanciful, others possibly referencing ancient alien visitors. Dr. Lou offered to pull data from their database of cross-correlated symbols and relics. Sarah expressed gratitude. Over the following days, the two pored over digital scans of prehistoric cave paintings and ancient tablets. Some were of vague figures with luminescent halos or wings. Others showed beings with elongated limbs or glowing bodies. Dr. Lou pointed to an especially intriguing set of paintings discovered in an isolated region, depicting humanoids descending from a bright craft, their shapes stylized in bold lines. Surrounding them were smaller figures that evidently represented early humans. Although the quality was primitive, it unmistakably hinted that these visitors bestowed something upon the humans, symbolized by lines or rays connecting them. The curator acknowledged that mainstream archaeology could only speculate, but some scholars believe these rays indicated knowledge or divine gifts. Sarah studied the images, feeling the hair on his arms prickle. It closely matched the centuries-old rumor that a primal had once crashed or landed on Earth, either intentionally or by accident, and in the process transferred a portion of its essence to humankind. He wondered if that was more than a myth. He became anxious to see if any actual physical evidence existed, so Dr. Lou led him to a climate-controlled vault. Within that space, he located fragments of bone from an unknown figure that tested as non-human in chemical composition. The dating placed them thousands of years before humanity's modern era. They had been discovered near the same site as the paintings. The fragments seemed to have degraded beyond the possibility of extracting genetic material, but the presence alone was notable. All the while, Sarah was not the only one doing research. The local authorities had begun to wonder why an Akarian xenobiologist was rummaging through Earth's ancient legends. Alarmed by the notion that he might seek weaknesses, Earth security ramped up surveillance. On the third night, Sarah noticed he was being followed while walking through a corridor lined with historical exhibits. He turned a corner and saw two uniformed men waiting. One politely requested that he accompany them for an interview, citing concerns about the nature of his research. Sarah weighed his options. He still needed more data, more samples. But if he refused, he might provoke them. Reluctantly, he agreed. They escorted him to a compact security office. A stern-faced official there introduced herself as Major Sandra Holt. She calmly informed him that Earth had reasons to be cautious. The Akarian Consortium was known for wanting strategic information on other species, and humans did not appreciate the possibility of being cataloged as a potential military target. Sarah tried to maintain composure, explaining that his interest was purely academic, but Major Holt pressed him. Why are you so fascinated by the earliest myths of extraterrestrial contact? We have plenty of modern data on humans. Why dig up relics? Sarah deflected as much as he could, saying that sometimes the greatest insights into an alien species come from understanding their origins. Though unconvinced, Major Holt allowed him to leave, yet sternly reminded him of Earth's protective stance. He returned to the Institute with his mind racing. If local officials continued to monitor his every move, he might lose the chance to confirm the primal link. And he dreaded the thought of inadvertently letting them know how significant that discovery was. The last thing he wanted was a planetary panic or a jumpy government deciding to retaliate preemptively against Akarian interests. The following morning, he received a cryptic note from Dr. Lou. Please come to sub-level G at your earliest convenience. Intrigued, Sarah went there, only to find Dr. Lou standing beside a locked cabinet containing old documents seldom accessed by the public. The curator looked uneasy and explained in a hushed tone that he had found references to a hidden archive, possibly containing data on unusual skeletons discovered across multiple continents. The archive might shed light on an otherworldly being who, according to legend, had once lived among ancient humans for a short time. Sarah's curiosity flared. He helped Dr. Lou open the cabinet. Inside were dusty records, some badly damaged, but enough was legible to hint at an event in which early human tribes nursed a gravely injured sky visitor who repaid them with a portion of divine essence. The language was archaic, riddled with symbolic references, but Sarah felt the truth leap off the pages. Could this be the moment when a primal, either by design or accident, had fused part of its genetic makeup with that of humankind? Their reading was interrupted by an alarmed voice echoing from upstairs. They hurriedly shut the cabinet and rushed up to find the Institute staff in disarray. News had reached them that warships belonging to the Tsian Imperium, longtime rivals of the Akarian Consortium, had begun appearing in the outer solar system. Rumors suggested that Tsians had learned something about an unusual potential for Earth and intended to either force the humans to submit or eradicate a latent threat. The corridors buzzed with tension. Dr. Lou ran to check the news feed, while Sarah stared out a window at the sky, mind churning. If the Tsians attacked, Earth might be caught off guard. Minutes later, urgent broadcasts filled every channel. The Tsian Imperium demanded Earth relinquish any secrets related to ancient genetic enhancements. Earth's government responded with confusion, disclaiming any knowledge. Meanwhile, an Akarian fleet was said to be mobilizing, possibly to check the Tsian aggression, though the lines of loyalty were not so simple. Sarah realized he might be inadvertently responsible for triggering this standoff. Had some snippet of his research leaked to a Tsian operative? Sirens wailed throughout the capital. Civilians fled the streets as the first Scion cruisers entered Earth's orbital perimeter, followed by smaller corvettes. Earth's defense forces scrambled, launching fighter craft. The entire planet braced for conflict. Sarret dashed back to the Heliod, intending to access his personal communications array and gather more intel. On the way, a group of armed men approached him, wearing insignia he recognized as Earth's Special Forces. Their leader demanded to know if Sarret had any knowledge of the Scion's incursion. Sarret shook his head, explaining that the Scions had always been a cunning race that exploited rumor. He tried to warn them that the Imperium suspected Earth was harboring some terrifying power, though the specifics might be unknown to the Scions themselves. During this tense exchange, an attack siren resounded. A bright flash outside the port window indicated a Scion vessel had fired on a satellite. Earth's fighter squadrons scrambled into the upper atmosphere. Explosion echoes reverberated in the skies. It was not yet an all-out war, but skirmishes had begun. Sarret realized Earth was dangerously outmatched in terms of advanced weaponry. Their ships and ground defenses were formidable by normal standards, but the Scions were a well-established military empire. The only factor Earth might have that no one fully understood yet was that latent gene. But how could it matter if it was not even activated? Dr. Lou contacted Sarret in desperation. "I need you at the Institute," he said through a trembling voice on the comm. A soldier was brought in, severely wounded during one of the first skirmishes. There's something strange happening with his physiology. Sarret hurried back, ignoring the protests of the Special Forces. When he arrived, he found a makeshift triage area set up in one wing of the building. The soldier lay on a cot, breathing irregularly, pulses of adrenaline spiking so high that the monitors flickered with overload warnings. Around him, a group of medical staff frantically tried to stabilize him. Sarret took in the scene. The soldier's eyes were half open, and the veins in his arms stood out in stark relief. A swirl of raw data scrolled across a device that a nurse was holding. Blood counts were off the charts, and the man's cellular respiration soared to levels previously unseen in normal humans. Dr. Lou pulled Sarret aside and whispered that the soldier had carried out a near-impossible feat under heavy fire, showing reflexes and endurance beyond typical human capacity. Only now, after the ordeal, was his body in crisis, as though pushing itself to a limit it never knew existed. The monitors beeped wildly. Then the soldier's breathing steadied, and his eyes snapped fully open. Sparks of something intangible seemed to dance in his gaze. He rose from the cot, ignoring the doctor's pleas to remain still. Sarret felt a prickle over his own skin. He'd never sensed anything like it, a faint hum, almost like a psychic resonance. Had this man unconsciously tapped that ancient fragment of primal genetics to survive the battlefield? The soldier looked around in alarm, but there was also a strange clarity in his expression. Sarret attempted to speak, but words momentarily failed him. They had no time to dwell on the phenomenon, for a muffled blast shook the windows. Outside, bursts of orange fire streaked the sky. A Scion dropship roared overhead. Fear seized the medical staff, and they began evacuating the wounded deeper into the building. The soldier who had awakened so dramatically insisted on returning to the fight, though he could barely stand at first. Sarret tried to hold him back, uncertain of what a partial activation of that mysterious gene would entail. A wave of energy, or perhaps adrenaline, rippled through the man, giving him enough force to push Sarret aside gently. Sarret, with all his Ikarian physical enhancements, still felt completely outmatched in that moment. Then, in the corridor, they nearly collided with a Scion infiltration unit. Armed and clad in advanced exoskeleton armor, the Scions barked orders in a guttural tongue, demanding Earth official surrender. The newly roused soldier glared at them. One of the Scions raised a weapon. Before anyone could blink, the soldier lunged forward with astonishing speed, gripping the rifle barrel and twisting it aside. The Scion fired, but the shot went wide, scorching the ceiling. In a flurry of motion, the soldier disarmed him, slamming him hard into the floor. Two more Tsians aimed from behind. The soldier whipped around and flung the disabled gun as though it were a spear, colliding with one attacker's visor. Sarek gaped. He recognized that raw, unfiltered surge of strength and reaction time. If that was merely a fraction of what a primal gene activation might look like, then indeed humans could be unstoppable under the right conditions. The soldier, though breathing heavily, still refused to succumb to fatigue. The other Tsian started to retreat. More Earth security arrived, and a firefight broke out in the hallway, forcing Sarah to duck behind a pillar. After a tense minute, the Tsians were subdued or forced back, and the building was secured. The soldier leaned against a wall, chest heaving, his eyes filled with shock at his own feats. No one had time to celebrate. Planet-wide communications flashed urgent messages. The Tsian flagship was entering low orbit, threatening a demonstration of force. Meanwhile, the Ikarian fleet had arrived at the solar system's edge, not to aid Earth unconditionally, but perhaps to prevent the Tsians from seizing control of a potential ultimate weapon. Earth's government tried desperately to negotiate, to no avail. The rumor that humanity harbored some unstoppable gene had triggered paranoia. Everyone was on edge. Even the local news channels were in a frenzy, speculating that if some humans truly possessed partial psychic or reality-altering capabilities, it would spark a new arms race. Sarek managed to slip away, back to the Heliod, his mind a-whirl. He weighed the possibility of going public with his research, showing that while humans possessed an unusual gene, it was not fully activated in most individuals and did not necessarily translate to an immediate threat. But the risk of misinterpretation or fear-based aggression was great. If the Ikarian leadership learned the full magnitude of it, they might decide to subjugate humanity before Earth could harness that gene at large. If the Tsians confirmed this phenomenon, they might annihilate the planet. Sarek's existence had become a catalyst. Even as these thoughts battered him, the Heliod sensors indicated intense activity in orbit. The Ikarian flagship had arrived, holding position just out of reach of Earth's main defense grid. The Tsian flagship, bristling with weapon arrays, maintained an even lower orbit, occasionally firing warning shots at Earth's interceptors. Tension hung thick. It felt as though the slightest spark could trigger a full-scale war. On the Capitol building's steps, Earth's leaders called for calm. They appealed to the Interstellar Council, but everything was moving too fast. Amid the chaos, Sarek took a chance and broadcast a wideband message using the Heliod's communications array, patching it into both Ikarian and Tsian frequencies. He identified himself formally, stating his position as a xenobiologist of the highest rank, and declared that he had vital information. His voice trembled, but he spoke as confidently as he could. The rumors you have heard are exaggerated. Earth's population has, on average, no immediate capacity to harness the so-called ancient gene. It is merely a dormant heritage, triggered only under extreme threat. To treat this planet as if it possessed a doomsday weapon is misguided. Further aggression will only awaken that which you fear. A hush spread across the channels. This was no official Earth declaration. This was an Ikarian scientist stepping into the role of an intermediary. The Tsians responded bitterly, accusing Sarek of deception. The Ikarian command demanded he return to the fleet for debriefing. But Sarek refused. He insisted that a direct confrontation might spark precisely the outcome everyone dreaded. A standoff ensued. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, news of Sarek's broadcast spread quickly. Some humans expressed relief that not every alien power wished to see them suppressed. Others raged, wanting no external figure to speak for them. Then, almost as if to punctuate the moment, the Tsian flagship unleashed a precision strike on a remote Earth base, perhaps to force compliance. Earth's defense network retaliated, damaging a Tsian corvette. This small exchange threatened to escalate, but the Ikarian fleet then maneuvered in, blocking the path of the Tsian flagship. Tensions soared, each side leveling threats. With adrenaline coursing through him, Sarek realized that if one more shot was fired in anger, they might witness a chain reaction. The The soldier he had seen earlier was likely not the only human with the capacity to push their body beyond normal limits. Chaos could overtake everything. He made a final plea on the broadcast. All forces, stand down. I will mediate an immediate negotiation. The discoveries concerning Earth genetics can be shared in a controlled manner, under Interstellar Council oversight. Further conflict will only produce the very outcome the galaxy fears. A species cornered, forced to awaken a power none of us fully comprehend. A tenuous ceasefire took shape. The Tzyan Imperium, though furious, agreed to pause hostilities for 48 hours. The Ikarian fleet hung in low orbit, silent and watchful. Earth's leadership, reeling from the violence, agreed to a hasty diplomatic summit at an orbital platform. Ships from all three parties converged there within hours, with armed escorts bristling, but refraining from actual engagement. Sarret attended on behalf of the Ikarian side, though he sensed the distrust from his own people. They suspected he had grown too sympathetic to humans. Still, they needed him, for he was the only one with the data on the ancient gene. Earth's representatives arrived, looking exhausted and wary, while the Tzyan delegation stomped into the conference room with open disdain. The platform's main chamber was ringed with tall windows, revealing the black tapestry of space. Everyone took their seats at a large round table. The talks began with pointed accusations, the Tzyans hurling demands that Earth be placed under strict oversight to prevent any development of genetic superweapons. Earth officials insisted they had no weapon program, that any unusual feats on the battlefield were purely an individual's adrenaline-based anomaly. The Ikarian delegates were divided. Some wanted to seize the opportunity to curb the Tzyans, while others preferred to keep Earth under surveillance to ensure no uncontrollable power emerged. Throughout it all, Sarret observed grimly. He rose partway through the discussion, presenting the genetic data he had collected. He explained how it appeared that a fraction of primal legacy lay dormant in Earth's population, requiring extreme triggers to manifest at all. He stressed that it was not a technology humans were deliberately refining. It was an accidental inheritance from an ancient being that made the phenomenon unpredictable and not something that would instantly produce a legion of unstoppable warriors. He offered a compromise. Earth could voluntarily disclose further genetic research to a neutral council of scientists, ensuring no militarization would occur behind closed doors. In exchange, the Tzyans would retreat their fleet, and the Ikarians would not attempt to forcibly take or replicate the gene. It was far from an ideal solution, but it might buy time for cooler heads to prevail. The Tzyan ambassador demanded the complete subjugation of Earth. The Earth leaders vehemently refused. The Ikarians threatened to withhold future assistance from Tsaya if they refused all compromise. The tensions soared again. Hours passed in fruitless bickering until, unexpectedly, a transmission came from Earth's surface. It was that same soldier who had awakened during the chaos at the Institute. He had found a public channel and spoke to the entire summit. I never asked for any special power, nor do I want to be used as a reason for war. I'm simply a man who found himself in an impossible situation. If you fear me, that's your choice. But realize my only desire was to protect my comrades. If the galaxy wants to judge all humans based on my desperate moment, then the galaxy should understand that any cornered species might find extraordinary strength. His words seemed to resonate in the chamber. The delegates fell into murmurs. Even the Tzyans paused. After a moment, an elderly Earth ambassador stood up, stating that humanity had no intention of seeking warfare or unleashing hidden powers. But if threatened with annihilation, they would fight back, as any species would. Did the Tzyan Imperium truly want to risk discovering just how far that gene might carry them? Did the Ikarians want the moral responsibility of lighting the fuse? A hush followed. In the end, the immediate crisis was defused. The Tzyans grudgingly agreed to step back to the outer region of the solar system, while continuing negotiations under Interstellar Council supervision. The Ikarian fleet withdrew as well, though they lingered just on the far side of Earth's moon. Earth's leadership allowed a small council of neutral experts to study the soldier's case, establishing that an extraordinary event had occurred, but that it was neither reproducible on command nor a stable technology. Hostilities eased, though the tension did not disappear overnight. The entire galaxy would remain on alert for the next development regarding humankind. Sarret returned to the surface, uncertain of his next step. He felt as though he had crossed a threshold in his life. He had dedicated his career to identifying weaknesses, but here he was, having helped reveal something akin to an overwhelming strength hidden within the species he was supposed to analyze. Not all of his Ikarian colleagues would forgive him for that. Even so, the alternative, leading to a catastrophic war, was unthinkable. He was not altogether surprised when a small crowd greeted him as he walked through the city near the Earth Historical Institute. Among them was Dr. Lu, the curator who had helped him uncover the evidence of possible primal contact in humanity's distant past. Next to him stood several humans, including that soldier, still looking weary. They each expressed thanks in their own way for Sarret's attempts to de-escalate the conflict. The soldier awkwardly noted that he did not fully understand what had happened to him, but recognized that a door had opened, revealing something inside him he had never known before. Sarret gazed at them all, feeling a peculiar mixture of warmth and guilt. In many ways, he had been the cause of the entire crisis by digging too deep, but at least he had not walked away and left them to their fate. A soft breeze blew across the courtyard. The scene felt surprisingly peaceful, a stark contrast to the battle that had shaken the skies only hours earlier. He joined them in a small conference room within the Institute, going over the final remnants of data in a calmer fashion. Dr. Lu proposed forging a new collaborative project, one that might allow humans to study their own potential under ethical guidelines, while also letting the galaxy rest easier by establishing a transparent process. That required trust from all sides. Could Sarret remain on Earth to help with that? The question hung in the air. Sarret contemplated everything he would be sacrificing. His standing in the Ikarian consortium might collapse, or his superiors might brand him disloyal. Yet he also sensed that walking away would mean abandoning a crucial moment in galactic history. He nodded slowly, accepting that this was where he needed to be. He told them he was willing to stay, to share what he knew, and to ensure no one attempted to exploit or pervert that ancient gene. Days turned into weeks, and the cosmic confrontation cooled, replaced by delicate negotiations. Science ships backed off further, thanks partly to Ikarian diplomatic pressure and partly to the soldiers' demonstration that Earth, though smaller, would not be so easily intimidated. The Interstellar Council arrived with mediators, holding sessions to formalize an agreement that prevented any forced genetic testing or weaponization. Earth pledged transparency in gene research, while the Tsians and Ikarians pledged non-aggression, so long as Earth did not deliberately pursue destructive powers. It was, of course, a precarious pact, and all parties knew it might unravel if tensions flared again. In quiet corners of Earth cities, rumors spread of superhumans and activated blood, fueling speculation and even cult-like fascination. The vast majority of people went about their daily lives, only vaguely aware of how close they had come to annihilation. Sarret, meanwhile, took residence in the Earth Historical Institute, forging a unique partnership with Dr. Lu and others. They meticulously documented the artifacts and records that hinted at ancient alien contact in Earth's prehistory, building a data set that might eventually become a formal presentation to the Interstellar Council. Every so often, Sarret and the soldier, who had identified himself as Corporal Marco Reyes, met to discuss the phenomenon. Marco's recollections were hazy. He remembered the adrenaline, the surge of unstoppable force, but he described it less like a violent outburst and more like a terrifying clarity, as if he could see the paths of the bullets, sense the positions of foes, and tap into some hidden reserve in his body. He confessed that part of him feared that power, worried it could consume him if triggered again. Sarret listened with empathy, no longer seeing humans as mere specimens. He recognized the weight of the gene's potential and the responsibility that came with it. On occasion, Sarret was summoned to orbit for questioning by Ikarian officers, who wanted to ensure he was not betraying state secrets. He navigated their inquiries carefully, explaining that cooperation was the best strategy. He emphasized that Earth was not an immediate threat, so long as no empire pushed it to unleash that primal spark. Some officers grumbled, believing Sarret was too close to these primitive mammals, but they lacked any proof of disloyalty that might stand up in a tribunal. Consequently, they tolerated his presence on Earth for the time being. Rumors arose that other species were watching Earth with newfound interest. Potential allies or opportunists might appear, hoping to harness or replicate the genetic quirk. The presence of Tsian scouts in distant sectors was still reported occasionally, fueling speculation about a covert plan. Through it all, Earth's inhabitants tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, though deep down they knew the galaxy's eyes lingered on them. One evening, Sarret went for a walk along an ancient Earth river that flowed near the city. The sun had slipped behind distant skyscrapers, painting the sky in orange and purple. It felt oddly tranquil, a moment of reflection. He thought about the chain of events that had begun in his lab with that tiny vial of human blood. Perhaps, in the long run, the discovery was inevitable, for secrets rarely remain hidden forever. He stooped to pick up a small pebble, turning it in his hand. Earth might seem simple at first glance: blue sky, watery landscapes, a relatively young civilization. But beneath that veneer existed not only a rich tapestry of cultures, but also a genetic secret that had almost ignited a galactic war. He returned to the Institute, where Dr. Luke greeted him warmly, having found another trove of text to translate. Together, they spent the late hours correlating lines of archaic script with known star charts. One set of references seemed to confirm that the sky visitor had arrived in a damaged vessel, possibly under pursuit. The text spoke of a fiery metal shape crashing with fury, followed by the visitor's weakened state. Local tribes rescued him, gave him sustenance, and in turn, he left them the seed of knowledge and power. Then he vanished, presumably dying or transcending. Whatever the case, he left behind a legacy that trickled down through millennia in faint echoes until modern science could detect it. Sarret felt shivers reading it. As dawn approached, Dr. Lu looked at Sarret and asked if he really believed that this event, so many thousands of years ago, was indeed a primal visitation. Sarret remembered everything he had read and seen, especially the phenomenon with Marco. He nodded gravely. The galaxy might debate the specifics, but in his mind, there was no other logical explanation. The question now was how humankind would handle that heritage. As if an answer, the early sunlight broke through a window, illuminating the pages on the table. Sarret saw it as a quiet sign that the new day might hold hope or danger. Weeks passed without additional violent conflicts. The Tsian Imperium seemed to be regrouping. The Ikarian Consortium quietly reduced its warship presence, though they still hovered at the system's edge as a reminder of their watchful eye. Earth's leadership took steps to unify, establishing special committees for advanced genetic research under the watch of the Interstellar Council. Slowly, that near-apocalyptic standoff became a guarded peace. Sarret felt a measure of relief, though he remained hyper-aware of the fragility of the situation. He continued assisting Earth scientists in developing guidelines for safe genetic study. He had no illusions that the legacy of the primals might create a golden age of superpowers, nor did he think it guaranteed cataclysm. It was simply a possibility, a dormant line of code, waiting for the right conditions to spark into life. He chose to remain on Earth indefinitely. In that choice, he accepted that he might be labeled a traitor by some in the Ikarian hierarchy, but a traitor's brand felt like a small price compared to the mass devastation that might have unfolded had he done nothing. Eventually, Earth arranged a modest ceremony in the steppes outside the Institute. Humans gathered to honor those who had protected the planet during the conflict, including the doctors, security forces, and ordinary citizens who risked their lives. Corporal Marco Reyes was recognized for courage under fire, though he humbly insisted he had just been trying to protect others. Sarret stood at the edge of the event, watching in quiet reflection as humans celebrated their resilience. Then, almost to his surprise, Dr. Lou called him forward, publicly acknowledging that had Sarret not intervened, Earth might have been overrun by either the science or the destructive fear that lay behind every paranoid trigger finger. The small crowd offered polite applause. Sarret, never one for public praise, bowed his head slightly, feeling a surge of mixed emotions. After the ceremony, Marco and Dr. Lou approached him, speaking in hushed tones about the future. They worried what would happen if Earth's population discovered in large numbers that they might harbor these latent abilities. Fear, greed, or misunderstanding could be as dangerous as external invasion. Sarret said he believed calm education and careful research might steer humanity away from a destructive path. The soldier, with a haunted look in his eyes, asked, "But what if we face another threat that corners us again? Won't we have no choice but to embrace it fully?" Sarret had no easy answer. Possibly yes. Possibly that was how entire civilizations evolved under extreme pressure. Over time, the story of a near invasion would spread across the galaxy, inevitably reaching the ears of other species. Some might respond with fear, others with curiosity, perhaps even alliances. Sarret could already foresee a swirl of politics arising around Earth. But at least for now, open warfare had been averted. He suspected that the faint echo of primal power in humanity was not just a raw weapon, but an indication of something grander, an ability to stand up even in the face of cosmic odds, to endure and adapt, forging their own path among the stars. A few months later, Sarret sat in a quiet corner of the Institute's library, surrounded by both modern holographic readers and musty old texts that Dr. Lou had shown him. Daylight trickled through tall windows. He had just finished scanning through the last of the newly translated manuscripts that described the ancient visitor's final words. There is no gift more powerful than the will to protect. He found himself pondering how that idea connected so naturally to what he had witnessed. Perhaps, in the end, humans had proven that real strength was not about conquering or dominating, but about safeguarding life, something that resonated deeply with the rumored ethos of the primals themselves. He walked outside and gazed up at Earth's sky, imagining the fleets and stations orbiting above, imagining how easily it could all be undone by a single volley of weapon fire. Yet for the time being, the galaxy was still. Maybe it was a calm before a new storm, or maybe it was the first step toward a more harmonious union. Nobody could say for certain. But the knowledge that humans carried a fragment of that primeval gene would forever change the cosmic landscape. Once discovered, such truths could never be locked away again. Dr. Lou joined him, a half-smile crossing his features. "Any regrets staying here?" Sarret shook his head. "Regrets, yes, but not for the reasons you think. Regret that I approached everything from a vantage point of exploitation at the start. Regret that it took a crisis to show me there's more to xenobiology than finding weaknesses. But no, I don't regret trying to help. This planet, your species, has taught me that vulnerability and strength often walk hand in hand." They strolled through the Institute's courtyard. Sarret inhaled Earth's air, tinged with the scent of greenery. He felt uncharacteristically content, as if some intangible burden had lifted. He had arrived on Earth seeking hidden flaws, but instead discovered an uncharted wellspring of resilience that defied his original assumptions. In that moment, he understood that even if tensions flared again tomorrow, and all the old fears returned, the galaxy had changed in an irreparable way. One could not simply treat humans as a lesser species to be cataloged and dominated. They carried the memory of an ancient legacy, and they were prepared to fight for their place among the stars. At night, as he returned to his chamber in a guest wing of the Institute, he recalled how the entire Odyssey had begun with a single sample of human blood in his laboratory. Such a small thing, seemingly innocuous, had set off a chain reaction that reverberated through multiple star systems. He remembered that swirl of data, the 7.3% match that shook him to the core. Without it, he might never have flown to Solaris Station, never have seen Earth, never have risked conflict with its science, never have participated in forging a fragile peace. A single droplet of blood, containing something far greater than just genes, containing a link to ancient power, to unstoppable will. He realized that weapon might be an inadequate word for it. Yes, it could lead to unstoppable feats of strength when cornered, but it was also an expression of hope, compassion, and the drive to protect what one held dear. That duality was something the galaxy might never fully comprehend unless it too was forced into a corner. And perhaps that was the real gift of the primals, intentionally or otherwise. The seed that, under the right conditions, could blossom not just into physical prowess, but a fundamental will to preserve life. Time would tell how humanity evolved from here. Would they remain at the mercy of galactic politics, or eventually chart their own destiny more boldly than anyone predicted? Sarret had done what he could, helped them through one crisis, introduced new lines of communication, offered to guide them in researching their latent potential ethically. The rest was out of his hands. As he drifted off to sleep, he wondered if somewhere out in the depths of space, a living primal might still exist, watching, waiting to see whether Earth's hidden spark would ignite into a bright flame or be snuffed out by fear. He woke at dawn, stepping outside to greet the day as the sun rose over the horizon. The city was peaceful, not yet fully awake. Gently, he ran his hand across the side of the building, feeling the warmth of the sunlight. A small part of him yearned to return to Acheron. Another part realized that perhaps he had finally found a purpose beyond the pursuit of weaknesses. In standing by the humans, he might help usher in a new era, one where knowledge, trust, and shared discovery held as much power as any warship. He took a deep breath and made his way toward the Institute, determined to begin another day of quiet but vital work, bridging two worlds that had been poised on the brink of destruction. Far above, the stars glimmered even in daylight, hidden by the blue sky but still there, reminding him that the galaxy was vast and teeming with potential allies and enemies alike. One day, Earth might unify its people, harness that dormant gene more fully, and step onto the cosmic stage with a presence that no empire could ignore. Until then, Sarret walked through the courtyard, aware that he had become part of their unfolding story. And somewhere in the deep corridors of Acheron's archives, that 7.3% figure would remain a cautionary tale or a promise, proof that sometimes what you scan for weaknesses can reveal the greatest strength of all. Arya leaned against the polished metal railing that surrounded the observation deck of Aeon Vista Station, her gaze fixed on the horizon of Argon 9. The sky was awash in dusky violet light, and two pale moons rose over the craggy mountains. To her sorry eyes, the scene should have been beautiful in a detached, almost clinical way. Yet she found herself taking deep, contemplative breaths, her heart strangely fluttering at the thought of new experiences that might lurk below the station's hull. The Tsari typically prided themselves on their calm logic, but ever since she'd come here, Arya had begun to sense something else stirring inside her. She turned when she heard footsteps echo on the deck's metal floor. A tall human in a charcoal uniform strolled up to the railing. His name tag read Lt.M. Grant. He gave a brief nod and a polite smile. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes softened his otherwise sharp features, and there was a confidence in the way he carried himself. Arya knew him by reputation. Lieutenant Marcus Grant, a security specialist assigned to the station. Humans were known for their emotional expressiveness, and sometimes for their unpredictability. "You're Arya, right?" he asked in a slightly curious, friendly tone. "The Tsari xenobiologist?" "Yes," she said, turning her body fully to face him. "I'm Arya, from the Tsari research delegation." She was aware of how her own voice sounded, soft but meticulous, a reflection of her people's careful approach to speech. "And you're Lieutenant Marcus Grant, if I recall correctly?" He grinned. That's right. I help oversee the security operations here on Aeon Vista. He leaned on the railing, scanning the horizon as though searching for something. It's quite a view, huh? Adia nodded. It is. Argon 9 has a unique atmospheric composition that produces violet twilight. On the Tsari homeworld, colors are more muted, so I find this intriguing. Marcus's grin widened. You should see your sunsets. You probably like them too. She tilted her head. I'd be curious to compare them scientifically. There was a moment of silence, and then her curiosity nudged her forward. I heard you and some other humans in the common area earlier discussing certain customs. Mating rituals, I believe. The memory brought a slight twitch to her lips, a half-smile that conveyed fascination. He coughed, a hint of color rising in his cheeks. Oh, that. We weren't really being serious. Or, well, we were joking around, but humans do have various ways of talking about intimacy. His eyebrows lifted. I hope you weren't offended. Not at all, Arya said calmly, her pinkish skin tone darkening just a little. I found it quite amusing. You mentioned doggy style. I must admit, I thought it was a fabrication or a joke. The term seems peculiar. Marcus chuckled, this time openly. Yeah, I guess it does sound strange to those who aren't used to it. But it's actually a real thing. People give all kinds of colorful names to different positions. He paused, a bit unsure how to continue. Anyway, it's just one of those colloquial terms in human. Well, let's say in human bedroom language. Arya folded her arms, her 4 fingers drumming lightly against her bicep. Her own Sari culture was so restrained about physical matters that her curiosity about the flamboyant human approach sometimes felt overwhelming. So it's not just a joke? She asked, her voice tinged with genuine wonder. It's real, Marcus confirmed, then his grin turned sheepish. But it might be better if I let you discover the rest of that story sometime later. Maybe after you've learned a bit more about us humans. She sensed the underlying playfulness in his voice, and something about the entire exchange gave her a strange thrill. I see, she replied, a slight curve tugging at her lips. I'd like to continue this discussion sometime. He cleared his throat. Sure, anytime. They shared a brief silence, both intrigued by the other in ways neither had fully expected. Finally, Marcus gestured behind him. I should probably head back in. I've got a briefing for a survey mission tomorrow morning. We're checking up on the local Vez activity near the southwestern ridges. You're on that list, right? As the xenobiologist. Arya nodded. Yes, I am. I'll see you then, Lieutenant. He gave her one last smile and walked away, leaving the subtle warmth of his presence lingering in the cool station air. The next morning, Arya stood on the hangar deck, double-checking equipment for the survey. Marcus was there with Sergeant Lopez, a pragmatic, sharp-eyed soldier who wore her hair in tight braids. Beside them, an Avix named Kellen clicked his beak-like mouth in impatience, while Trix, the station's small, humanoid robot assistant, buzzed around carrying gear. Outside the station's massive external doors, pale sunlight illuminated Argon 9's rugged landscape. The environment was notorious for sudden dust, storms, and the presence of Vez, 6-legged reptilian predators known to roam in packs. Marcus approached Arya, his expression more official now that he was on duty. You all set? She nodded. I have my sample kits, scanner, tranquilizer rounds in case we need to capture a Vez specimen. I'm ready. Kellen let out a shrill whistle through his specialized translator. We only have a 6-hour window before the next weather shift. Let's not dally. Sergeant Lopez rolled her eyes. Relax, Birdman. We're moving. The team boarded a rugged transport vehicle designed for the planet's uneven terrain. Inside, the seats were cramped, and the overhead lighting flickered sporadically. Marcus took the driver's position, starting up the engine with a low hum. Arya sat beside him, glancing at the various monitors that displayed external temperature, wind speed, and other atmospheric conditions. Wind's picking up, Marcus observed. Not too bad yet, but we should keep an eye on it. Arya leaned forward. It might be the start of a dust storm. I've studied Argon 9's climate. Storms can form rapidly, triggered by shifts in atmospheric pressure. Lopez cracked a knuckle. As long as we don't get stranded, I'm good. Don't fancy fighting Vez in a sandblasted wasteland. Marcus nodded, and navigated the transport out of the hangar. They rumbled across rocky ground, the station's looming structure disappearing behind a ridge. For the first hour, everything was uneventful. Arya used her handheld scanner to analyze air samples while Marcus steered around boulders. Kellen took notes on topography, and Trix chirped helpful facts in its metallic monotone. Suddenly, a flare of red lights on the vehicle's dashboard made Marcus frown. "Dust storm warning," he announced. "We got about 15 minutes before it hits us. Let's collect what we need and head back." Arya quickly moved outside with a sampling tool, scooping up some soil near a crevice. The wind whipped at her hair. She worked efficiently, her sorry physiology well adapted to keep her steady under different atmospheric pressures. As she was sealing a sample tube, the wind escalated, stinging her cheeks with grit. "Arya, let's go," Marcus called, stepping out of the transport to wave her back in. She rushed toward him, the wind gusting with an ominous howl. Sand and dust spiraled across the terrain, and the vehicle rocked. Without warning, a loud crack resounded beneath their feet. The ground split, a fissure opening in the stony surface. Marcus lunged forward, grabbed Arya's arm, and yanked her away from the collapsing patch of land. She stumbled into him, her chest thumping as they both scrambled to safer ground. In the chaos, Sergeant Lopez and Kellen shouted from the other side of the gap. The fissure had carved a wide trench between them and Marcus's side. Arya coughed against a surge of dust. The wind howled louder, filling the air with swirling debris that obscured the view of their teammates. "Lopez, Kellen, do you read me?" Marcus yelled into his comm. Static was his only answer. Trix's beeping faintly rang out from somewhere beyond the swirling dust, but the signals were distorted. "We have to find shelter," Arya shouted over the roar. She pointed to a nearby outcropping of rock formations. Through the haze, she could make out an opening, a cave perhaps. "That way." Marcus nodded and grabbed 2 supply bags from the transport's hold. The vehicle itself began to slide precariously toward the new ravine's edge. "Can't risk taking the transport with us," he muttered. "We'll come back for it if we can." Together, they made a dash for the rock formations, battered by fierce gusts of wind. The dust storm grew so thick that they had to rely on proximity sensors on Arya's scanner to avoid stepping into another fracture. Finally, they reached the mouth of a cave. It sloped downward into darkness, but at least it was stable and out of the wind. Marcus set down the supply bags and exhaled. The sound of the storm raged just outside, but here, inside these walls of stone, it was quieter. Arya brushed sand from her hair. "We can set up a temporary beacon once the storm calms a bit. For now, let's rest and wait it out." Marcus checked his comm again, still static. "We should prepare for a long wait. Sometimes these storms last hours." He pulled out a small lantern and switched it on. Pale light swept across rocky walls, revealing a narrow chamber with enough room for them to sit comfortably. They settled down, removing outer layers of dusty clothing and checking any injuries. Marcus found a shallow scrape on his forearm, and Arya cleaned it with disinfectant from a first aid kit. She did so in careful, methodical strokes, the proximity between them creating a tension neither had consciously anticipated. "Thanks," he said, his voice low. "You Tsari are thorough." "We prefer to be precise," she answered with a faint smile. The dusty air in her lungs made her speak. Softly, almost intimately. "I was worried you'd fall into that fissure." "I was worried about you," Marcus countered. "You were closer to the edge than I was." A silence lingered between them. Arya found herself staring at his features in the lantern's glow. The small flecks of dust in his hair, the trace of a bruise forming on his cheek. The sense of closeness felt strangely comforting. She wasn't used to experiencing such warmth toward another, especially someone from an entirely different species. As the hours stretched on, they realized the storm was intensifying rather than calming. The wind howled like a tormented creature outside, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Marcus unrolled a compact thermal blanket from the supply bag. "We're going to need to share this if the temperature keeps falling." Arya nodded. "Sorry, physiology handles a range of temperatures, but this humidity shift is unpleasant." She accepted his offer, and soon they were side by side, under a thin layer of insulated fabric that pressed them closer together than either had expected. She felt his body heat, heard the steady rhythm of his breathing. In Sari culture, physical proximity was seldom shared outside of familial or intimate bonds. But here, necessity blurred those lines. Curiosity made her heartbeat quicken. She glanced up at him, her pinkish skin a few shades darker from the flush of warm blood and possibly from the closeness of another being. Marcus caught her gaze. There was a moment that hung suspended in the narrow confines of the cave. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I am," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. "This is just very different for me. Sari do not typically do this." "You mean snuggle up in a cave?" He joked lightly. She allowed a small laugh. "Yes, among other things." Then, emboldened by the sense of shared vulnerability, she continued, "I've been meaning to ask. That phrase from earlier about doggy style. It intrigues me. Is it truly one of your cultural mating positions? I realize the name references canines on Earth, but is it actually a reflection of how your species mates?" Marcus's face grew hot. He attempted to maintain composure, but her directness was both disarming and oddly endearing. Yes, it's real, but it's not something, it's not something I usually discuss in such a matter-of-fact way." He paused, then decided there was no harm in explaining. Humans have a variety of sexual positions, some named after animals or silly terms. Doggy style is one such position where the partners. Arya listened intently, her curiosity unwavering. "I see. Fascinating. Sari mating protocols are quite regimented, reserved mostly for reproduction. We don't have these, shall we say, creative approaches." He managed a soft chuckle. Humans can be creative, and also more emotionally invested in intimacy than just reproduction. She considered that. "I've observed that your species has a strong connection between emotion and physical bonding." His eyes flickered with something she might have interpreted as kindness. "Usually, yes, but it can be casual, too. Humans range in how we form connections." Arya nodded. Then a more playful note laced her voice. "So doggy style is not a myth. Perhaps I should experience it once for scientific understanding." Marcus blinked in surprise, his heartbeat pulsing. He couldn't quite tell if she was teasing or entirely serious. That's not the typical reason people do it," he said with an awkward grin. She smiled, a subtle expression that was still noticeable to him. "Forgive me. I find your openness about these things both amusing and oddly compelling." The tension in the air grew thick. Marcus suddenly felt the confines of the cave pressing in, the storm's howl a distant roar behind the electric sensation arcing between them. Before the moment could stretch further, a skittering sound echoed from somewhere deeper in the cave. Both froze. Marcus reached for his sidearm. Arya lifted her scanner. The signal spiked. Something was moving in the darkness. A flicker of green light indicated a life form about 15 meters away. The shape was large, and it seemed to be crouching on multiple legs. "A Vez," Arya whispered. "Possibly. Or another predator," Marcus replied quietly, flipping off the safety on his gun. The creature hissed, a terrifyingly sharp sound, and lunged forward just close enough that Marcus caught a glimpse of its six-limbed form. He fired a burst of light rounds, and the creature screeched. Arya engaged a small sonic deterrent from her belt, which emitted a high-pitched pulse. The predator flailed backward, stumbling deeper into the cave before it disappeared from sight with an eerie shriek. They held their breath, hearts pounding. After a tense minute, area scanner readings returned to normal. Marcus exhaled. "Guess we're not the only ones using this place for shelter." Arya forced a small laugh to ease the adrenaline rush. "We should stay on guard." "Agreed," he said. The near attack somehow heightened the awareness of their predicament, magnifying the unspoken connection forming between them. Arya touched Marcus's arm gently in a silent expression of gratitude. He nodded, feeling that jolt again. In the flickering lantern light, words seemed unnecessary. By dawn, the storm had subsided, leaving a landscape of drifted dunes and newly formed gullies. Marcus and Arya cautiously emerged, scanning for any sign of their teammates. They climbed to a vantage point atop a rocky ledge. The station was far on the horizon, almost invisible in the hazy morning light. Marcus tried his comm again. This time, a crackle answered him. "Lieutenant Grant." The voice of Sergeant Lopez came through, garbled but discernible. "Do you read?" "Loud and clear." Marcus responded, relief flooding him. "We're about 8 clicks from the station, near some rock formations." We made it back hours ago," Lopez said. "We've been searching for you on scanners. The storm was too severe. Captain's about to send a rescue team." "Understood," Marcus said. "We're on our way. We'll meet them halfway if possible." The link wavered, but they managed to confirm coordinates. Marcus turned to Arya, who was smiling in relief. "Time to go home," he said. She nodded. "Yes. Let's hope the others are all safe." They scrambled back down the rock face, retrieving their supplies and heading eastward. The trek took another hour, and they occasionally had to dodge sinkholes formed by the storm. At one point, Marcus slipped on loose gravel, nearly tumbling down a shallow ravine, but Arya caught his hand, bracing herself to haul him back up. He gave a nervous laugh afterward, breath unsteady. "Thank you," he managed. "This is the second time we've saved each other," she noted, a hint of warmth in her tone. "I suppose that makes us even." He wanted to say more, to joke that maybe saving each other's lives was an ongoing habit, but they heard approaching engines. The rescue team arrived in a smaller hovercraft. Sergeant Lopez waved from the driver's seat. Alongside her stood Kellen and Trix, both looking relieved. Arya and Marcus climbed aboard, grateful for the water and medical checks they received. By the time they reached Aeon Vista, they learned that only minor injuries had occurred to the rest of the squad. The ground fissure had caused some panic, but no one else had been left behind. They were lucky. As they re-entered the station, the shift from Argon 9's punishing environment to the sterile interior felt almost surreal. Various staff members eyed Marcus and Arya curiously, noticing their joint return. Rumors spread quickly about them huddling in a cave overnight. To humans, that might be gossip-worthy, but not scandalous. For Tsari, however, the mere possibility of closeness raised eyebrows. They headed together to the medical bay for standard post-mission checks. While Marcus was being examined, Arya underwent scans by a Tsari medic. The conversation in the background turned to the next big piece of news. Commander Vol, a high-ranking Tsari official, had arrived unexpectedly for an inspection. That piece of information set Arya on edge. She knew Commander Vol's strict adherence to protocol. Any sign of fraternization with a human could cause trouble. Sure enough, once the routine checks ended, Arya and Marcus stepped into the corridor, only to find themselves face-to-face with Commander Vol. He was older, with deep magenta skin that had darkened over decades, and his piercing gaze locked onto Arya first, then Marcus. "Specialist Arya," he said, voice clipped, "and Lieutenant Grant. I've heard about your unfortunate incident outside the station." "Yes, Commander," Arya said with a respectful bow of her head. "We were trapped by the dust storm." Vol's mouth tightened. "I'm relieved you returned safely. However, I trust that Tsari research mission hasn't been compromised by unnecessary distractions." There was no mistaking the undertone. Arya felt a flash of annoyance, though she kept her composure. "We collected several samples. My research remains on schedule." "Excellent," said Vol coolly. Then he glanced at Marcus. "Lieutenant, perhaps you could excuse us while I speak privately with Specialist Arya about Tsari matters?" Marcus stiffened slightly but nodded. "Of course. I'll see you around, Arya," he said, giving her a parting look that held a trace of concern. Then he turned and left. Commander Vol wasted no time. "There's talk," he began, "about how you and the humans spent the night together. I assume this was purely a necessity of survival." Arya felt her cheeks warm. "Yes, Commander. We were forced to share a shelter, but everything was in the interest of safety." "Good," he said, though his tone suggested doubt. "You know how precarious the Tsari-Earth alliance can be. We came here to study, to cooperate academically. and militarily, but not to form personal entanglements. Arya swallowed. Understood. He gazed at her for a moment longer. Then his expression softened just a fraction. See that it remains understood. I'd hate for you to be recalled prematurely. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Arya standing there, her heart pounding with mingled frustration and fear. She knew that Sari's stance on cross-species relationships was rigid. She also knew how quickly the rumor mill on Aeon Vista could spin out of control. Later that afternoon, while analyzing some soil samples in the lab, Arya heard a discreet knock on the glass door. She looked up to see Marcus, who raised a small sealed container of coffee. She motioned for him to come in. "Am I interrupting?" he asked softly, stepping past the rows of lab counters. "Not at all," she replied. "I'm just running tests on micropopulations in the post-storm soil." She paused, eyeing the container. "Human coffee?" He nodded with a faint grin. "I heard Sari can't process the same stimulants as humans, but this is a milder variant. I thought maybe you'd like to try something from Earth. A token of cultural exchange, so to speak." He offered her a small cup. The aroma was enticingly bitter. She hesitated, then took a sip. The taste was strong, slightly burnt, but not unpleasant. She felt a minor jolt to her system, though nowhere near overwhelming. "Interesting," she said, placing the cup down. They fell into a comfortable silence for a moment. Arya recalled how close they had been in the cave, the warmth of his body. She also remembered Commander Val's thinly veiled warning. A sense of tension warred within her, the desire to learn more about this human who intrigued her, and the caution demanded by her people's tradition. Marcus cleared his throat. "Look, about everything that happened out there, if there's any trouble for you, because we—" "It's fine," Arya interrupted, forcing a calm tone. "Commander Val is merely ensuring I follow Tsari protocols." She pushed a strand of white hair behind her ear. "Our cultures have different boundaries." "I get that," he said quietly, stepping a bit closer. "I also don't want you to get in trouble on my account." She met his eyes. "It's not your fault. Besides, I can handle myself." A small, confident smile played on her lips. "That Sari can't keep ignoring the fact we're working intimately with humans on this station." "Intimately, huh?" He teased lightly, though the words held a deeper meaning that made Arya's cheeks warm again. Before the conversation could go further, the overhead comm system beeped, and Captain Reynolds' voice boomed. "Lieutenant Grant and Specialist Arya, report to the briefing room for a mission debrief." "Repeat, Lieutenant Grant and Specialist Arya. Briefing room immediately." Arya exhaled, stepping back. "Duty calls." He nodded. "Let's go." They arrived at the briefing room to find Captain Reynolds and Commander Val waiting, along with a small group of officers. Screens displayed images of the planet's surface with red clusters indicating increased Vez activity. Sergeant Lopez was there, arms crossed, and Kellen perched on a chair, his feathers rustling with tension. "Lieutenant, Specialist," Reynolds began. "We have reason to believe a massive Vez swarm is converging on Aeon Vista, possibly the largest we've ever recorded." Arya's breath caught. She studied the data on the screen. The swarm count was in the thousands. "That's extraordinary," she murmured. "They've never grouped in such numbers before." Commander Val's voice was grave. "This station may not withstand an assault of that magnitude unless we coordinate our defensive systems. My team is prepared to offer Tsari technology support, but we will not risk our people unnecessarily. We expect Earth to do its part." Reynolds shot Val a measured look, then turned to Marcus. "Lieutenant, you'll oversee the station's security measures. I want you to coordinate with Tsari forces. We can't let petty differences undermine our survival." Marcus nodded. "Understood, sir. We'll do whatever it takes." The meeting continued with discussions of defensive lines, weapon placements, and potential traps. Arya contributed her knowledge of Vez behavior, explaining how they might be repelled by certain sonic frequencies. She'd need time to set up a wide-range sonic emitter, though. Time it might not have. When the briefing ended, the staff filed out. Commander Val lingered, giving Arya a subtle look. "Specialist, remember what I said about priorities," he remarked quietly before leaving the room. Arya pressed her lips into a thin line. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "We'll figure it out," he said, voice low. "Focus on the crisis first." She nodded, grateful for the support that his presence gave her. "Yes, let's." Over the next day, Aeon Vista transformed into a fortress. Barricades were set up. Around the perimeter, automated turrets recalibrated, and Sari snipers took positions in elevated watchtowers. Arya worked furiously in a secure lab, designing a sonic pulse array that could scramble the Vez ability to coordinate. She had only theoretical models to go on, so everything hinged on whether the Vez would react as predicted. Marcus spent long hours directing squads, checking defenses, and collaborating with Sari officers. He occasionally crossed paths with Arya in the corridors. Each time, their eyes met, and the unspoken tension hummed. She could feel the weight of the entire station's eyes on them, though. Rumors about their closeness had escalated, and with a looming threat on the horizon, no one seemed to have the luxury of subtlety. Some whispered that its human romance could jeopardize command decisions. Others joked that it might unite the station like never before. As the Vez swarm approached, final preparations were made. Everyone was on edge. The southwestern scanners picked up the first wave at dawn. Captain Reynolds sounded the alarm, and every combat-ready individual took their assigned station. Arya double-checked the sonic emitters, while Marcus readied his rifle squad on the outer walls. Commander Vol oversaw a group of Tsari troopers managing advanced energy shields. Moments later, the horizon rippled with motion. Thousands of Vez, slim, chitinous creatures with 6 legs and elongated jaws, poured over the rocky terrain. Their collective hissing filled the early morning air. Automated turrets opened fire, brilliant arcs of energy lancing into the swarm. Some Vez fell, but more crawled forward in a near-hypnotic advance. "Hold positions," Marcus commanded into his comm. "Conserve ammo until they're within effective range." Arya watched from control station, heart pounding. She keyed in final adjustments to the sonic array, then broadcast to the comm. "Array 1 is charging. I need at least 2 minutes before we can fire." In those 2 minutes, the Vez slammed against the outer barricades. Sari sharpshooters rained precise bursts from the towers. Human soldiers fired repeated energy pulses along the perimeter. The swarm was relentless, clawing at metal plating, hurling themselves against walls. A shriek from the southwestern corner signaled that part of the wall had collapsed. Marcus sprang into action, leading a counter-assault that forced the Vez back. He could see Commander Vol fighting nearby, the Tsari's energy blades slicing through Vez carapaces. The tension between them was replaced by a mutual desire to survive. At last, Arya's voice came through. Sonic array firing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She hit the command. A deep hum pulsed through the air, rippling outward in a wave. The Vez convulsed, their movement patterns thrown into chaos. Many scattered in confusion, while some turned on each other in frantic spasms. A roar of triumphant relief spread among the defenders. Marcus used the opportunity to direct artillery fire into the thickest knots of Vez. The plan seemed to be working, until a new shrieking call echoed across the battlefield. A cluster of what looked like Alpha Vez, larger and more heavily armored, charged forward. They were unaffected by the sonic wave, or else they'd adapted rapidly. They barreled through the scattered ranks, regaining the swarm's direction. Arya's instruments blinked red. "They're blocking the frequency. We didn't account for this subspecies," she muttered, sweat beading on her brow. She tried recalibrating, but it would take more time. Marcus regrouped with a squad at the southwestern approach. The barrier there was half-ruined, jagged metal twisted upward. A trio of Alpha Vez pounced, tearing at the defenders. One soldier went down, screaming, before Marcus gunned the creature down. Another Alpha Vez lunged for Marcus, who rolled aside, blasting at its flank. The beast staggered, but not enough. It leapt again, jaws snapping inches from Marcus's face. He managed a final shot that pierced its abdomen. It collapsed, leaving him gasping. Nearby, Commander Vol was cornered by a pair of Alpha Vez. Marcus didn't hesitate. He sprinted through the carnage, launching himself at Vol to shove him away from a lethal strike. One of the creatures latched its claws into Marcus's side, and he roared in pain. He blasted it point blank. The second Alpha Vez slammed him to the ground. Marcus's head hit the metal plating, and everything went blurry. A faint cry, Vol's voice, rang in his ears, then darkness. When Arya realized Marcus's comm had gone silent, her heart seized. She glimpsed security footage from the southwestern sector, saw the swirling images of Alpha Vez, and recognized Marcus's figure pinned on the ground. Without thinking, she abandoned her station, ignoring the calls of other technicians. Her only thought was to reach him. She ran out, weaving through the battered corridors, avoiding panic. Staff. In the southwestern yard, Vez corpses lay strewn around. Sari troopers and human soldiers fought side by side. The stench of blood and burnt chitin hung in the air. Arya sprinted past them, scanning the battlefield until she found Commander Vol kneeling by a still figure. Marcus's armor was shredded in places, blood staining the plates. His eyes were closed. Vol looked up, grim. He saved me. The Alpha Vez. He paused, struggling for composure. We need medical evac right now. Arya dropped to her knees. Marcus was breathing, but shallowly. She fumbled for her portable med kit, pressing it to his side to staunch the bleeding. Marcus, she whispered, tears burning in her eyes. His eyelids fluttered, but he remained unconscious. A Tsari medical team arrived, loading him onto a stretcher. Arya hovered nearby, trembling with fear. She realized with painful clarity that she didn't want to lose him, that she couldn't bear the thought of him dying. The wound in her chest was emotional, not physical, but it felt just as searing as any Vez claw. Commander Vol placed a hand on her shoulder, an uncharacteristic gesture of comfort for a Tsari so stiff in manner. He fought bravely, saved my life. I will ensure he receives the best care we can offer. Arya nodded, swallowing. For the first time, she saw genuine respect in Vol's eyes. Then she stumbled along behind the med team. The battle outside raged on, but the station's automated defenses and the partially effective sonic pulses were slowly driving the swarm away. For Arya, the only thing that mattered was staying by Marcus's side. Hours later, in Aeon Vista's medical bay, Arya stood over Marcus's bed. He was patched up, covered in bandages. Doctors had extracted bits of chitin from his wounds and stabilized him. He hovered between wakefulness and sedation, an intravenous line hooking him to machines that monitored his vitals. The frantic beep of the heart monitor was a constant reminder that he was alive, yet vulnerable. When his eyes finally flickered open, she was there, relief spilling over her face. "You're okay," she murmured, reaching for his hand. Her slender, Tsari fingers interlaced with his, the difference in the number of digits oddly fitting together. He gave a faint, exhausted smile. "Mostly. Feels like I got run over by a star cruiser." A light laugh bubbled from her lips, tears threatening to follow. "Don't cry," he teased gently. She forced a half-laugh. "Sorry, rarely cry." But her voice cracked. "I'm just so glad you're still here." His hand squeezed hers. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered, then grimaced. "Well, maybe the infirmary for a while." Commander Vol entered, his expression muted with respect. "Lieutenant Grant, I owe you my life." He glanced at Arya, then back to Marcus. "Your bravery has proven that humans possess a valor I once doubted." Marcus's voice was weak, but steady. "I just did my job. Defending the station is what we're all here for." Vol nodded. "In recognition of that, and of the cooperation between our species, I intend to endorse a new approach to Tsari-Earth relations. There's talk among Tsari leadership about recalling Specialist Arya, but I will argue otherwise. She should remain to continue her research." He paused, flicking a glance at Arya's hand still clasping Marcus's, "and to further this partnership." Arya met Vol's gaze, gratitude brimming. Marcus's eyes slid to her, relief tempered by exhaustion. It felt as if a monumental barrier had lifted. Once Vol left, the med bay quieted. Captain Reynolds dropped by to congratulate Marcus on a heroic stand and to let them know the Vez swarm had retreated. Casualties were not small, but Aeon Vista stood intact. Over the next few days, the station's routine resumed as best it could. Crews repaired structural damage that Sari worked side by side with humans to rebuild. Arya remained almost constantly in the infirmary, checking on Marcus. When he finally had enough strength to be moved to a private recovery room, Arya was there helping him get settled. He laid back against the pillows, wincing slightly. "I never thought a few days could feel like a lifetime," he said. She sat at the edge of his bed, a gentle hand on his bandaged arm. "You'll be up and about soon. The doctors say your rapid healing is remarkable, even by human standards." "Guess I'm full of surprises," he joked. He studied her face. "Arya, about everything. Don't strain yourself." She cut in softly, a wry smile curving her lips. "I already know. I feel the same." His breath caught. He opened his mouth to say more, but words failed him. Instead, he lifted a trembling hand to her cheek. She leaned into his touch, eyes drifting shut. They shared a moment of raw closeness that transcended the differences of their species. She leaned closer, brushing her lips against his. The kiss was gentle, cautious, yet the spark between them flared. He tried to deepen it, but she pulled back with a soft laugh. "You're still recovering," she chided. "And I recall humans need their rest to heal effectively." He let out a breathy chuckle, wincing at a pang in his side. "Darn it, you Tsari are too disciplined." Her eyes gleamed. "Only sometimes," she said enigmatically. Then her gaze flickered with reminiscence. "You know, we never quite finished that conversation about doggy style." Marcus coughed, half laughing, half mortified. "We didn't, did we?" She shook her head. "I'm starting to understand that there's a lot more to intimacy than the Tsari approach. It's not merely mechanical. For humans, it's about emotion, physical connection, creativity, maybe even love." He met her eyes. "Yes, love. That's something I never thought I'd find on a station in the middle of nowhere, especially with someone from another species. But here we are." A smile lit her face, softening her features. "Here we are," she echoed. 2 weeks after the swarm attack, Aeon Vista was mostly repaired, the air thick with a sense of renewal. Captain Reynolds granted Marcus leave to fully recuperate, and Commander Vol had relaxed his stance so much that he allowed Arya to remain by Marcus's side, even outside her strict lab duties. The two of them found themselves assigned to modest quarters that had been retrofitted to accommodate a Tsari's needs as well as a human's. It was a clear statement that the station's leadership recognized their bond. One evening, Arya stepped out onto the small balcony that overlooked the canyon ridges. The purple twilight cast everything in a dreamlike hue. Marcus joined her, leaning on the railing with a careful tilt, mindful of his healing injuries. "This place has grown on me," he admitted. "When I was first posted here, I thought Argonine was just a bleak station, stuck in some kind of cosmic backwater." Arya chuckled softly. "And I arrived thinking humans were brash creatures who valued emotion over reason to a fault. Perhaps we've both been proven wrong. Or proven right, in a way," he teased. "Your people needed a bit of that emotional flair to shake things up, and maybe we needed your logical approach to stop us from stumbling blindly." They stood for a moment, absorbing the quiet hush of the evening. Then Arya asked, "Is it typical for humans to stand so close and watch the sky when they're forming an attachment?" He moved closer, resting a gentle hand on her lower back. "We call it romance sometimes, or simply enjoying each other's company." She turned to him, eyes searching his. "I do enjoy your company, Marcus Grant," she said sincerely, "even if I still want to learn more about these so-called bedroom customs of yours." He laughed, a deep, joyful sound. "You're never going to let that go, are you?" "Scientific curiosity," she replied, deadpan, though a smile tugged at her lips. He leaned in, brushing his lips to hers. This time, there was no immediate sense of caution, just mutual discovery. The warmth pooled between them, and she parted from him with a light flush on her cheeks. "Show me," she whispered. Marcus hesitated, half smiling. "Are you sure? I don't want to overstep." especially with your cultural constraints. Aria's gaze was steady. Commander Vol himself acknowledges that things need to evolve. And she paused, selecting her words. I choose this. I choose you. He pressed a soft kiss against her forehead. Then let's see if my injured self can manage some demonstration, he teased. She chuckled and followed him inside. Their quarters were modest. A bed against one wall, a small table with chairs, a window that overlooked Argon 9's terrain. The metal floors hummed with the station's power grid. She helped him remove his uniform jacket gingerly, mindful of the bandage on his side. He carefully slid her sari vest off her shoulders, tracing the lines of her upper arms. The difference in their bodies was intriguing. Her pinkish magenta skin, the four-fingered hands, contrasted with his tan complexion and five-finger grip. Yet each touch felt natural, as though there was no barrier of species at all. He guided her onto the bed. She observed him with unwavering attention. Her heart pounded with a mixture of nerves and excitement. He stroked her hair, letting his fingertips trail along the white strands. You're beautiful, he murmured. A shy, pleased expression crossed her face. I am grateful to hear that. She lightly rested a palm on his chest. Your heart is beating very fast. That's normal for a human when we're, attracted, he admitted with a grin. She laughed, the sound musical. Then I suppose I'm experiencing something similar in Sari terms. They leaned into each other, lips meeting in a tender kiss. The warmth grew. She found her breath catching when his hands slid down to her waist, guiding her gently. Despite his injuries, he moved with care and confidence. She remembered his words about doggy style and let out a nervous, anticipatory laugh. Is this where you show me your cultural demonstration? She asked, half playful. He bit his lip, cheeks coloring. I did promise you a thorough lesson. But let's go slow, okay? I don't want to hurt you. Or me, he added with a wry smile, gesturing to his bandaged side. Her eyes gleamed with both amusement and curiosity. Slow is acceptable. I have no immediate obligations. They continued with hushed laughter, exploring one another in an intimate, yet gentle way. The moment was deeply personal, built on mutual respect rather than mere lust. Their kisses deepened, touches growing bolder. When they finally shifted into a position that resembled something Arya could only describe as the doggy style he mentioned, she felt an odd combination of embarrassment and excitement. It was physically different than what Sari considered the standard mating posture for reproduction. Yet, as Marcus guided her with patient hands, she discovered new sensations that made her exhale in ragged breaths. He, too, seemed utterly captivated by her responses. They let the moment flow until it ended in a wave of passion that left both of them breathless. Collapsing side by side, they laughed softly, the sweet afterglow mingling with lingering adrenaline. Marcus brushed a strand of white hair from her face, his voice tinged with awe. You okay? She exhaled, eyes closed. Yes, I never realized mating could be this pleasurable. For Tsari, it's so clinical, but for humans, it's about connection, he said, about sharing something more than just a biological function. She opened her eyes, gazing at him with quiet wonder. Understand that now. A tender silence enveloped them. Outside, the twin moons cast faint light through the window. I suppose I see the appeal of doggy style, she murmured, a light laugh coloring her tone. Though I suspect there's even more to discover. Marcus's grin turned playful. Trust me, humans are creative, remember? She nestled against him, feeling his steady heartbeat. I look forward to it, she whispered. Over the next few days, life continued on Aeon Vista with a newfound sense of unity. Commander Vol and Captain Reynolds signed off on official documents that expanded Sari-Earth cooperation, referencing the joint defense of the station against the Vez swarm. Aria's research gained full support, and rumors circulated that the Tsari might set up a permanent presence at the station. Now, rather than hinting at scandal, the gossip about Arya and Marcus often leaned toward admiration, how a Tsari specialist and a human lieutenant bridge cultural gaps on every level. When Marcus was well enough to stroll through the corridors without wincing, He and Arya took frequent walks together, discussing everything from Sari art to Earth music. They became a fixture of sorts, two figures leaning close, sometimes laughing, sometimes whispering in hushed tones. No one seemed surprised when they announced they'd be cohabiting a larger room specifically adapted for Tsari human living. Sergeant Lopez even quipped about keeping the station's morale high. One evening, Marcus found Arya on a deck overlooking the canyons, reminiscent of the day they first truly spoke. She stood at the railing, her hair catching the moonlight. He sidled up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist gently. She leaned back with a contented sigh. "Remember when you thought doggy style was just a joke?" he murmured, lips near her ear. She snorted softly. "Yes, that seems like a lifetime ago." He kissed her temple. "Any regrets?" She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze with solemn sincerity. "None. You?" she asked, a faint note of worry edging her tone. He shook his head. "Never. This has been the most unexpected, amazing thing that's ever happened to me." They let silence speak for them a moment, the hush of the station's mechanisms blending with the soft wind across Argon 9's surface. In the distance, a faint glow of lights from the station's perimeter shone, a testament to the alliance that had formed to keep the Vez at bay. Arya placed a hand on his chest, feeling the slow, steady thump of his human heart. "We've come so far," she said, voice quiet. From strangers in a cafeteria, discussing bizarre-sounding mating customs, she paused, a gentle smile curving her lips, sharing everything. He caught her hand, pressed it to his lips. "Sharing everything," he echoed. Then his expression turned playful. "Is that your formal way of saying you're now an expert in doggy style?" She laughed, leaning into him. "I'll never be an expert by human standards, perhaps, but I'm enjoying my continuing education." He laughed too, warmth flooding his chest. "I'm a patient teacher." They stood like that for a while, content in the knowledge that against all odds, against storms, Vez attacks, and cultural taboos, they had found one another. Aeon Vista's corridors no longer felt cold and utilitarian. The future, once a haze of potential danger and strict boundaries, was now an open path where both Sari and humans might discover new forms of understanding, empathy, and yes, pleasure. And it all began with that one curious question, that single misunderstanding about a dog-centric phrase that had seemed so odd to an alien ear. As Arya and Marcus headed back inside, hands entwined, they knew there were more adventures to come, more diplomatic missions, more scientific breakthroughs, and more private moments in which they'd share laughter, tenderness, and a certain position that was far more than just a joke.